In step 7 of the Quick Start guide, you'll be importing some GIS raster data, which is different than the vector data that we have been importing. So to do that, you've been using either the simple or the advanced import. For geo raster data, you'd use the traditional way to place any raster data in Illustrator, which is underneath File and Place. So before we do that, we need to adjust the layer that it's going to go onto, which is this one right here. If you look in your map views, you can see that there's no feature type associated with that, and it has to have something, just like in step 6 we had to have a text layer. So let's drag this up to our Vancouver downtown map view. You'll notice that there's no image option here, but images can be set to basically anything but legend. So the feature type with area as the setting is perfectly fine. With that set, I'll go ahead and move this out of the way. I'll go to File and Place. Now in the Quick Start Data, the folder we've been working with, underneath Raster Files, you should see this one, Vancouver Downtown. Just ignore this modified one. Go ahead and select that and click Place. Now at first, it'll look like it didn't work. Whenever you place any graphic file, Illustrator by default will just put it in the center of your window, whatever that may be. We still need to register this and scale this. Now without the plugin, if you've ever tried to align map information in Illustrator, you can do stuff like this. You can distort it and squish it and rotate it and try and get it to line up. But with the Map Publisher plugin, that functionality is built right in, as long as the data has a georeference file associated to it. So I've got this image still selected, and I'll use this tool right here, the Register Image, which is on the Map Publisher toolbar. Now, as I've mentioned before, most geodata, pretty much all geodata, has other little files associated with it, whether it's database information, whether it's projection information, and raster images are no different. So we'll need to load a reference file. Click on Load File, navigate back to that same folder. In this particular situation, you just reselected the same file. GeoTIFFs are nice in that way, in that that extra bit of information can be embedded. Sometimes it's embedded, sometimes it's not. You either just need to know or look for another file with a similar name. But since this information is embedded, I just reselect the same file and tell it that is what you're going to use to reference this image. You'll notice the values in these fields have changed. You don't need to change those at all. Just click OK. And that image is lined up perfectly to the other geo data. With this video, I'd like to show you a little preview of Photoshop and Geographic Imager and its functionality, especially when working with Illustrator and Map Publisher. I'm going to go ahead and open that same file, and I'll do some very quick edits. I'll invert it, I'll crop it. Now what's really valuable here is all of the geographic information and coordinate system that's associated with this file, it's being maintained. Without the plugin, all of this is destructive. You're losing all of that valuable geo data and any attributes that might be associated with the individual cells. You know, if I zoom in really far, GIS raster data typically has information for each pixel in that data set. Let me zoom out. I'll grab my paintbrush and just do some Photoshop-y type stuff here. Now, this isn't a very meaningful edit, but the point is I just want to show you how this will line up when we take it back to Illustrator. I will save this file as modified 2. You can see I've already did some experimenting. Just the default settings are fine, and I will go back to Illustrator. Now instead of putting this on that same image layer, I'll create a new one. I'll move it up top, and it doesn't really matter what it's named. But what's important to note here is this layer does not have a feature style associated with it. And I want to show you what happens if you don't set that ahead of time. So I've got the layer selected. Once again, I'll go to File and Place and select that file. Again, we see it just kind of placed in the middle of our view. So it's selected. I'll repeat the same steps. When I try to register it, now I'm prompted with a message saying, hey, there's no layer that has a feature type that this will work on. Do you want to create one? So if you don't do it at one step, it'll just prompt you to do it at a later step. But there's something interesting that's going to happen here. I'll click OK, and let's load that same file because it's embedded inside, and it's all retained because of Geographic Imager. And then I'll click OK. So still doesn't look right, does it? It put it at the bottom of our artboard. But here's why. When we imported that, and if you're paying attention, you would have noticed that it put it on its own new map view. And as you should know, if you want to transform any geographic data from one map view to another, all you need to do is drag it. So if I take this, drag it to Vancouver downtown, and if I zoom in, you can see that it is aligned perfectly. And just to illustrate this a little bit easier, I'm going to open up my transparency window and change that. So there you go. Very useful tool, especially if multiple people are working on the same graphic image. They can crop it and slice it and dice it however they want. It can all be easily brought back in its correct context. And once it's at this point, we can export it to all sorts of different geo formats that will be useful.